A quick new idea, daily, from the world's greatest TEDx talks. I'm your host, Atossa Leoni, and this is TEDx Shorts. Many industries are currently examining internally biased policies when it comes to hiring practices. While diversity and inclusion are important markers for any institution, today's speaker believes journalism is perhaps more truthful when more voices are included. Maria Hinojosa has been a journalist for decades, and after decades of working in newsrooms that highlighted a limited perspective, she built her own media organization. In today's talk, Maria shares why journalism must include more voices in the stories being told.
We were a Mexican immigrant family growing up in Chicago in the middle of the civil rights era. My dad was a medical doctor devoted to researching the inner ear, but he was a news junkie. He spoke English with a thick Mexican accent, but he watched Meet the Press every Sunday. He read Time magazine religiously, and he watched the Today Show. As a little girl, I understood the importance of journalism and reporting in media, but I never saw myself there. My stories didn't appear. We were invisible. I was invisible from the media narrative. No one in the reporting that I saw looked like me, looked like my family. So I began to think that maybe somehow my life, my story was less valuable, less important. Then one day I saw Martin Luther King speaking. And it was this person who looked the most unlike me who made me believe that maybe one day, yes, I could in fact be a part of the fabric of this country. I didn't know this invisibility. I just lived it. I didn't understand it. And I came to see myself and feel myself as the other. Well, I moved to New York to go to college. I formed a radio show at my university called Nueva Canción y demás. And we were documenting what really was a renaissance of Latinos and Latin Americans in New York. Artists, intellectuals, political refugees from South America, from the Caribbean were coming into New York City. And we were documenting that on my radio show. We would hang out in art galleries in Soho till late, and then we'd go to the Polish-Ukrainian restaurant that was open 24 hours. And we'd be gathering around a table, speaking excitedly in Spanish about Nietzsche and Kant and existentialism. And the white bohemians would be looking at us like, what are they yelling about? And could they just be quiet? But I was living and experiencing stories that I wasn't seeing anywhere on the media. And I began to believe that this life that I was leading in New York, this international, multi-culti, truly diverse, Latin American, Latino, urban experience, was really just an extension of the great American experience. And I began to believe that I was actually catching the earliest glimpses of the American future. I became a journalist. So yeah, I was the first Latina in many newsrooms. So I felt like a fish out of water, and I did not get the jokes. But, I would force myself to raise my hand in the editorial meetings because I understood that this perspective that I had should be included in the media narrative. It wasn't that I thought that what I was thinking or feeling was better or worse. It was just different and needed to be included. And I chose to do stories where other reporters wouldn't go. And I felt a responsibility to do that. During World War II, innocent Americans were imprisoned. They were Japanese Americans, and there may not have been bars in the prison, but they were imprisoned. And yet in newsrooms, it was decided that this would be called an internment. Who made that decision so that it would be more palatable for the rest of us? So what did I do? I formed my own newsroom. I created the Futuro Media Group based in Harlem, USA, and I hired a team committed to diversity where we think critically about all of these issues, and together we decide the stories that we're going to tell and how we're going to tell them. So on my radio show, Latino USA on NPR, and on our television series, America by the Numbers on PBS, we don't approach this massive demographic change that we're experiencing like something that needs to be feared, like, oh my God, what's happening? No, we look at it as something that needs to be acknowledged, that needs to be reported on critically through lenses of power, race, inequality, immigration. And we believe that the reporting that we do, this visibility that we give, is actually helping people navigate an America that is becoming increasingly complex and increasingly diverse. And in our newsroom, we do things a little bit differently because we can. So we don't use the term illegal when describing an immigrant. So is that a bias? Or are we removing one and simply telling the truth? For our television series, America by the Numbers, we went to Clarkston, Georgia, which is just 10 minutes south of Atlanta. It is one of the most diverse square miles in the American South and could be one of the most diverse square miles in our entire country. This is not the American South of black and white. This is the American South of Ellis Island. Immigrants and refugees streaming into Clarkston. Yet when we went there, the city council was all white. So the new citizens were invisible. We were there to do reporting about what these new citizens feel about participating in American politics, of voting, the Constitution. And we talked animatedly about this because that was my path too, from immigrant to citizen. When we went back 2 years later, something extraordinary had happened. For the first time ever, in 1 year, 3 former refugees had decided to run for office in the city council. And the thought that I was able to share this with the new citizens of Clarkston and help them go from invisible to visible was an amazing moment in my life as a journalist. So who gets to tell the story matters. You know, we look back now in our country, oftentimes in horror, and we think, massacring the Native American people? Lynching innocent African Americans? Imprisoning innocent Japanese Americans? Treating civil rights protesters like they were animals? And so I wonder whether or not we'll look back to this day, and people will say, they were holding women, children, toddlers, and babies in detention because of their immigration status? They were doing that then? And who was telling those stories? Or why weren't those stories being told? Who was in those newsrooms? Well, we know that at Futuro Media, we are telling those stories and making them visible. I'm also a professor, and so I tell my students who are the descendants of immigrants or immigrants themselves that they should now see themselves as if they are the new pilgrims, the new pioneers, and that this is the way that they'll be written about in the history books, not like the descendants of some illegal people. And we all want them to feel visible and included, and not like the other, because they are our future.
The TEDx talk you just listened to was recorded at a TEDx event in Washington, D.C. All TEDx events are independently organized by volunteers who believe in TED's mission of ideas worth spreading. Special thanks to the organizing team at TEDxPennsylvaniaAvenue. Want to listen to more TEDx talks? Explore the entire archive on the TEDx YouTube channel. I'm Atossa Leoni. Thanks for listening, and see you tomorrow.